Hi, fifth graders. Welcome to Chapter 7, Lesson 3. This lesson can be found on page 433 in your textbook. Today we will be using fraction and whole number multiplication. The standard for today is in Number and Operations Fractions 5.4. This standard says I can multiply fractions. I can determine the sequence of operations when multiplying a fraction by a whole number or in multiplying two fractions. I can use different strategies to find the area of a rectangle with fractional side lengths, including the use of models. We are not going to be finding the area just quite yet. That will happen later on in this chapter, but it is falling all within the same standard. Like I said, today we are working with fractions and whole number multiplication. Our essential question is asking, how can you find the product of a fraction and a whole number without using a model? So under Unlock the Problem, it says Charlene has 5 1-pound bags of sand, each a different color. For an art project, she will use 3/8 pound of each bag of sand to create a colorful sand art jar. How much sand will be in Charlene's sand art jar? Well, first of all, we need to figure out how much sand is in each bag. And if you read, it does say that there are 5 bags, and each bag is 1 pound. So there's 1 pound of sand in each bag. And will Charlene use all of the sand in each bag? Well, we know that this is a no, because it says she will use 3/8 pound of each bag. So she will use 3/8 pound from each bag. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and multiply our whole number, which is 5, because remember there are 5 bags and each bag has 1 pound. And we are going to take 3/8 of those 5-pound bags. So if you wanted to show using the model, we have 5 times the 3/8. Notice that each bar has 8 sections. And then when they show the 5 times 3/8, they have 3 out of those 8 sections colored in. Well, to show how to find the answer, we would just color in 3 sections for each of these 5 bars that represents the 1-pound bag. And again, there were 5 bags. So now, if I rearrange these shaded pieces, I see that I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 total sections shaded in from those 5 rectangles. So if I rearrange this to fill in as many possible to see if I have any full bags or a partial bag, obviously if there are 15, I would color in the entire first rectangle because there are 8 sections. And then I know 15 minus 8 is 7, so I need to shade in an additional 7 sections for the second rectangle. So I see that I have 1 full bag, and then I have 7/8 of another bag. So I know just by doing the model, there are 1 7/8 pounds of sand in Charlene's sand art jar. Now, you're not going to want to show a picture for every single question that we are doing, so we're going to go ahead and show how you would multiply our fractions. Now, when multiplying fractions, this is different than what you are used to when adding and subtracting, because multiplying fractions, we take top number, which is the numerator, times the top number, so the other numerator, and then bottom number, so the denominator, times the other denominator, bottom number. So anytime we say top times top, bottom times bottom, you know that you're multiplying the numerators together and the denominators together. Now, when we have whole numbers, we don't have a denominator that is shown in our whole number. So when we think of whole numbers, we know that if I would take any whole number and divide it by 1, it would give me that exact same whole number. So all whole numbers have a denominator of 1. So I would technically have 5 over 1 times 3 over 8. Now we don't necessarily have to show that 5 over 1, but it is helpful when we go to solve for our lesson 7.6 and so on. So when I take top times top, I have 5 times 3, which is 15. And then bottom times bottom, obviously it would be 1 times 8, and we all know that any number times 1 always equals that same number. Now, I see that my answer is 15/8, and back from chapter 6, I know that I cannot have an improper fraction. So to simplify this, I need to make sure that my fraction is no longer improper. So I'm taking that 15/8 and I want to make it into a mixed number. Now if you recall, we did use our little saying called TIBO. And if you remember, that means top number inside. So that means the numerator is on the inside of our division bar. And then bottom number, which is the denominator, outside. So that's on the outside of the division bar. So for my improper fraction of 15/8, my top number is 15, my bottom number is 8. I know 8 does go into 15 one time. 15 minus 8 is 7. And if you recall, the 1 is your whole number. And then your remainder is the numerator. And then the divisor is your denominator. And notice my denominators did not change. So my original denominator of 8 is my denominator for my mixed number as well. So 15/8 does equal 1 7/8, and that is my final answer. I can't simplify that anymore. Moving on to the next page. For this example, again, I have a whole number multiplying by a fraction. It says Kirsten brought in 4 loaves of sliced bread to make sandwiches for the class picnic. Her classmates used 2/3 of the bread. How many loaves of bread were used? So again, I can easily show this using a picture model, where if each loaf of bread is being represented by a rectangle, and if I'm using 2/3 of each loaf, I can break apart each loaf into 3 equal pieces. And of those 3 equal pieces, I need to shade in 2/3. So right here, I want to count up how many sections I do have colored in. So 2, 4, 6, 8 sections were colored in. So what I can do is I can rearrange the shaded pieces to fill as many holes as possible. So if I break apart these loaves of bread into 3 equal pieces again, we said that there were 8 sections that were shaded in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I see that there were 2 full loaves of bread that were completely used. And then I see that I have 2 out of a total of 6 loaves of bread. I'm sorry, 2 out of 3 additional loaves. I apologize, because I have 2/3. So I have 2 2/3 loaves of bread that were used. Obviously, I can see that there was 1 full loaf of bread that wasn't used, an additional 1/3. So if I wanted to say what was not used, I would have 1 1/3. Now to show the actual multiplication, remember it's 2/3 times 4, and my 4 is technically with a denominator of 1. So when I take top times top, I have 2 times 4. Bottom times bottom, that would be 3 times 1. So 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. Again, we cannot have an improper fraction, so my 8/3, I do have to T-bow top number 8 on the inside, bottom number 3 on the outside. 3 goes into 8 2 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Subtract, that leaves me with 2. So again, my whole number is the quotient. My numerator is the remainder. And my denominator stays the same, so 2/3. So looking at this next bullet point, it's asking, would we have the same amount of bread if we had 4 groups of 2/3 of a loaf? Well, this is yes, because if we have 4 groups of 2/3 of a loaf, you're still essentially taking 4 times 2/3. So we just switched the order. My original problem was 2/3 times 4. And if you switch the order and do 4 times 2/3, we know with the commutative property, we can switch the order and still get the same answer. Going down to the try this, I always put the whole number with the denominator of 1, so that way it helps me remember. So I know that if I take top times top, 4 times 7 is 28. Bottom times bottom, 1 times 8 is 8. Now I have to T-bow. So top number 28 divided by bottom number, which is 8. 8 does go into 28 3 times, which is 24. 28 minus 24 is 4. So I have 3 and 4/8. Now looking at this, I notice that this is still not in simplest form because 4 is half of 8. So if I divide them both by 4, I would have 3 and 1/2 as my final answer. So again, our answers must be in simplest form each time we solve. Moving on to B, my denominator for my 12 is 1. 5 times 12 is 60. And then 9 times 1 is 9. When I T-bow, 60 divided by 9. 9 goes into 66 times. 9 times 6 is 54. Subtract, that leaves me with 6. So my mixed number is 6 and 6/9. Again, I notice that this is not in simplest form, so I am going to go ahead and divide both of them by 3. So when I divide them both by 3, I have 6 and 2/3 for my final answer. Moving on to the next page. Again, we're just going to set up with our whole numbers of having a denominator of 1. And I know that when I multiply this, I have my 3 times 2 for my top times top, which is 6. 1 times 5 for my denominator for bottom times bottom, which is 5. So my improper fraction is 6/5. If I show the T-bow, 6 divided by 5. 5 goes into 6 one time. 6 minus 5 is 1. So I have 1 and 1/5 for my final answer. Moving on to question number 2. Put the denominator of 1 from under the 5. So top times top, I have 2 times 5 is 10. Bottom times bottom, 3 times 1 is 3. T-bow, 3 goes into 10 3 times, gives me 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. So my answer is 3 and 1/3. For number 3, denominator of 1 underneath the 6. So top times top, 6 times 2 is 12. Bottom times bottom, 1 times 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And that's all I have for my final answer. I do not need to have that 0/3. There are times that you will get a whole number for your final answer. Question number 4. Remember, denominator of 1. So top times top, 5 times 4 is 20, bottom times bottom, 7 times 1 is 7. When I T-bow, 20 divided by 7, 7 goes into 20 2 times, which is 14. 20 minus 14 does give me 6. So my final answer is 2 6/7. Now, at this point, I would pause, work through 5, 6, and 7, and then when you turn it back on, I will have the answers, and then you can check your answers with mine. So for number 5, your improper fraction is 33/5, and when you T-bow, you get 6 3/5. For number 6, your improper fraction is 9/4. When you T-bow this, you get 2 1/4. And for number 7, your improper fraction is 15/8. When you T-bow this, you get 1 7/8. So now, on to the homework. On Schoology, you will be working on all of the even questions. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 for the front. Then on the back, you will be doing all of them. So for question number 1, it says, at the movies, Liz eats 1/4 of a box of popcorn. Her friend Kyra eats 2 times as much popcorn as Liz eats. How much of a box of popcorn does Kyra eat? So we know that we are taking 2 times 1/4 to get our answer for how much of a box of popcorn Kyra eats. For number 2, it takes Ed 45 minutes to complete his science homework. It takes him 2/3 as long to complete his math homework. How long does it take Ed to complete his math homework? So we are going to be taking 45 over 1 times 2/3. Moving on to number 3. It says, what is the best estimate for this quotient? So the easiest way to solve this one, you're going to take 600 divided by 30. So I just rounded both of them to their greatest place value. And when I do this, I have an easy division problem that I can solve. For number 4, it says Sandy bought 3/4 yard of red ribbon and 2/3 yard of white ribbon to make some hair bows. Altogether, how many yards of ribbon did she buy? So because we want to know how many yards of ribbon she bought altogether, this is an addition problem. So 3/4 plus 2/3. So for this, don't forget, you do have to set up to have a common denominator. We're back to adding, so we have to have a common denominator, and then we have to make sure our answer is still in simplest form after we add these 2 fractions together. For number 7, Eric jogged 3 1/4 miles on Monday, 5 5/8 miles on Tuesday, and 8 miles on Wednesday. Suppose he continues the pattern for the remainder of the week. How far will Eric jog on Friday? So this is a pattern question. We've only worked with patterns and decimals, but it's the exact same thing when working with fractions. So I am going to list my pattern. I have 3 1/4, 5 5/8, and then 8. And then I know we have to still figure out for Thursday and then Friday. So my very first thing I have to do is I have to find a rule. I see that my terms are increasing, so that tells me I have to add. And now I need to figure out what I'm adding by. So this does need to be a subtraction problem. I know that it's a lot easier to just go ahead and subtract 8 minus 5 and 5/8, because then I don't have to worry about finding a common denominator. I can just go ahead and borrow from the 8, make it a 7, and because my denominator for the 5/8 is an 8, I'm going to have 8 over 8 to represent that one whole. So 8/8 minus 5/8 is 3/8, and then 7 minus 5 is 2. So I am going to have to add 2 and 3/8 on to the 8 to get Thursday, and then do the same thing to get Friday. So if I add 8 plus 2 and 3/8, I know that I still have 3/8, and 8 plus 2 is 10. So I have 10 and 3/8 for Thursday. So now to find for Friday, you're going to take your 10 and 3/8 and then add on 2 and 3/8 to that. Make sure your answer is in simplest form. Once you do this, you will have your final answer for Friday. For number 6, this question says Sharon bought 25 pounds of ground beef and made 100 hamburger patties of equal weight. What is the weight of each hamburger patty? So you're taking the 25 pounds that she has and dividing it into the number of patties she's making, which is 100. Now this is a lot easier if you swoop your decimal. Remember, we found out that dividing tells us to swoop left. And the number of zeros tells us how many swoops to go. Don't forget, you do have to swoop from the decimal, and all whole numbers have a decimal at the end. If you would prefer to show the long division, remember the first number is your divisor, is your dividend, so the 25 goes on the inside, the 100 goes on the outside. And we know that 100 can't go into 25, so that automatically tells you to add a decimal and a 0 to then figure out how many times 100 goes into 250. And then keep working with that until you don't have a remainder. If you have any questions about this homework assignment or the lesson in general, please let us know. Thanks.